Today we wander with St. Katharine Drexel. She lived from 1858 to 1955. Her feast day is March 3rd, and she's the patron saint of racial justice and philanthropists. We're always trying to get more, aren't we? We wander through the mall, pointing at items in store windows, wishing we had enough money for that computer game or those CDs. Then we page through magazines, looking at the ads for clothes, makeup, and the latest cool toys, and wishing we had some of that stuff too. Don't forget television. Don't forget the commercials filled with bright colors, loud music, and lots of happy kids telling you, "You gotta have it!" Grown-ups want more too. A pay raise, a better job, a bigger house, maybe even that super lucky lottery ticket. It's all about more. We've got to get more stuff. Then we'll really be happy. Really? Think about this. A young woman wakes up one morning to find out that she's got millions and millions of dollars, all hers to spend on whatever she wants. There's no question in her mind. She's going to spend, and she's going to spend big. But she's not going to spend the way most people would. She's going to spend the rest of her life giving that money away. This is a true story. It's the story of our newest American saint, Katharine Drexel, a woman who was born into wealth and who couldn't wait to give it all away. Katharine was born in Philadelphia to a family of wealth and power. Her grandfather, and then her father, had built a fortune in banking. Katharine lived with her mother and father and sister. When Katharine was just a month old, her mother died. Not long after, her father remarried, and he and his new wife had another daughter. That made 3 Drexel sisters in all. It seems that giving was in the Drexel blood. Katharine's parents were quite generous. Katharine's stepmother, Emma, was beloved among the poor of Philadelphia for the help she offered. Twice a week she'd open the Drexel's back gate to the poor, and she'd spend her day filling any need that was brought to her, be it food, shoes, or money for rent or medicine. Emma also paid rent every single month for the apartments of 150 families. It was a happy life filled with comfort, travel, and lots of generous giving. Sadness came, though, as it does to all families, and it came to the Drexels all at once. In 1883, when Katharine was 25, her stepmother died. 2 years later, her father died. The 3 Drexel girls were all alone. After the sadness and shock had worn off, the young women had to think about their lives. They had been left a fortune, $14 million. What would they do with it? They knew right away. They would follow their family tradition of giving. The oldest, Elizabeth, used her share to build orphanages for boys. The youngest, Louise, spent much of her money on schools for African American children. That leaves us the middle child, Katharine. Katharine would certainly continue her family's tradition of giving. She wouldn't make any changes there. But another part of her life would change drastically. Katharine would give up her life of comfort. She'd give up a future that could have been filled with fancy homes, parties, and beautiful clothes. Katharine would become a nun. Not only that, she'd start her very own religious community. Here's what happened. After her father died, Katharine became interested in the problems of African Americans and Native Americans. In those days, African Americans were still recovering from the horrors of slavery, and they faced a great deal of prejudice and discrimination. Many Native Americans were suffering too. They had been driven from their homes by the American government and had been forced to live on reservations. Many suffered in desperate poverty and sickness, and their children had a great need for good schools and teachers who cared about them. Katharine traveled to Rome and got to meet the Pope. During their talk, Katharine told the Pope about the problems of the poor people of these 2 minority groups. She asked him to send European nuns and priests to America to help them. But the Pope had another idea. Why didn't Katharine become that missionary herself? Well, that idea had occurred to Katharine before, but she'd never received much encouragement from anyone. People had told her that such a life would be too great of a change for her. Katharine prayed. She looked at the situation. She thought about her own gifts and talents, and about how she felt God wanted her to use them. The decision was clear. Katharine would indeed become a nun. She'd even take her decision one step further. Katharine would start her own religious congregation, called the Sisters of the Blessed. Katharine would start her own religious congregation, called the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament. Serving African Americans and Native Americans would be their only work. It wasn't an easy job. When Katharine and her sisters started their schools, they often received threats from hateful people. These people didn't want to see minorities educated. They didn't want them to get good jobs. But despite the threats, Sister Katharine Drexel continued to work. She founded a school in Santa Fe, New Mexico for Native Americans. Then she founded a school in Virginia for African American girls. In all, Sister Katharine was responsible for starting 49 elementary schools and 12 high schools. She also started one university, Xavier University in New Orleans, which was built especially to give African American students an excellent college education. Sister Katharine lived for a long time. She died in 1955 at the age of 97. During her long life, she spent every bit of her share of the family fortune. But she didn't spend it on herself. She could have bought anything she wanted. The most beautiful clothes, the most fascinating new trinkets, trips around the world, and rooms in the most luxurious hotels. But St. Katharine Drexel looked to Jesus and found a better way. St. Katharine Drexel made unexpected changes in her life that helped others. How do you think it feels to make a change like that?